Welcome to a new session of the Learning SEO Accelerator. In today's edition, we are going to talk about technical SEO, the main concepts, Q&As, going through the main challenges and how to tackle those common scenarios that the accelerator participants have asked about in advance. And to, let's say, lead today's sessions, I have invited to Geoff Kennedy to participate. Geoff is a very well experienced SEO consultant, SEO specialist who have worked both from the agency side, also in a tool that you all use and love and have access to, Cyboop, in fact, an SEO auditing tool. And now is also an independent SEO consultant who has a big focus on technical SEO and SEO auditing, right? So I thought he will be a perfect person, a perfect SEO to tackle some of those common scenarios that tend to arise when learning about and starting with technical SEO. Hello, Geoff, how are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for coming to share your wisdom today with all of us. To start a little bit of the conversation, I always like to begin with the concepts, right? Not repeating necessarily all the best practices and documentations that we have in this particular case from Google itself. If there's documentation about something that has been revamped, updated lately, has been about the importance of technical SEO, how technical SEO works in general. But just to highlight what is core here to understand, then when we talk about technical SEO, we talk about how we optimize our websites to facilitate Google to crawl, to index, and if our website relies on client-side JavaScript rendering, to render that content or configuration that relies on JavaScript. So the goal here is that Google is able, or the Google bot is able to see our content as the user does, as well as the user does, right? Because at the end of the day, this is how Google will be able to assess and identify what our website is about, what our pages are about, and be able to run these pages based on the content that they feature, the information that they provide. Then how important is this particular content based on internal links, backlinks, etc., right? But in order to do all of this assessment, Google needs to be able to access, to get into these pages. And for that to happen, we need to configure our website pages to be easily accessible for Google. That means that we should ensure configurations like we are not blocking the Google bot or the search bots from accessing our websites through our robots.txt with a disallow /, for example, or we are not no indexing all of the pages of the websites by mistake with a meta robots no index, for example, or canonicalizing through the canonical tag, pointing all of the internal pages to the home page rather than to themselves, all of these configurations, right? But as you can see in my explanation before, all of these elements and areas are there for us to configure. And if we don't validate and check how each page should be configurable, we can easily by mistake, right? No index a page that should be indexable, right? A page that is meant to rank, to be indexed and ranked, because it's an important page that should get traffic, because should target critical, important query for the business. So what we need to think when we have access to all of these configurations is that how do I need to configure my website to ensure that Google is able to access to all of these pages that I want Google to access, because these are my meant to be ranked pages, first and foremost. And then how, if our website is huge, if it has millions of URLs, how can I make that the Google bot doesn't waste its time crawling and accessing all of these pages, internal search results, for example, that should be usually no index, because they feature information that is already accessible and shown through proper categories, subcategories, product pages, and then they end up showing information that is not unique, that is thin, that is duplicated, etc., that is not well internal linked. So it's not necessarily wise for us to index these pages to be ranked, because there are other more relevant pages to rank for the same queries. And then how we configure this other pages that we don't want Google to see, that we don't want Google to index or rank, so they don't do it. So again, we are going to have these scenarios in which we really want to endorse Google to access, to crawl, and index, take into consideration the content, see the content of the pages. And in other cases, we will have, the bigger the website, the more these scenarios of pages that we don't want Google to waste effort on. And this will become truer and more important the bigger the website is. I mean, if we have a little website based on WordPress that we know that have a lot of plugins and they highly facilitate this configuration, our technical SEO effort literally will be done in a day, right? If we have access to this configuration, if it is a website where we have a lot of flexibility to configure, and the page and the website has 10 pages, 20 pages, we'll have this done literally in less than a day, right? However, if we end up working on a project in which the website has millions of URLs, we don't have access to change directly anything because there are developers, relevant developers for this area, where there are a lot of constraints of what can be done and changed, because these platforms, websites rely on very old school CMSs, and we are not allowed easily to redirect any pages or canonicalize pages. Or this is where, let's say, the real challenge of technical SEO comes, right? It becomes clear that at the beginning, there is this curve of learning the concepts and how to use each configuration for a purpose, to endorse Google crawling and indexing, or to not, or avoid, etc. But then it becomes clear that the challenge ends up not necessarily being about the knowledge, but how to navigate and manage all of these challenges that we will encounter usually in bigger organization. The bigger the website is, the more complex will be to implement all of these challenges, right? Geoff, based on your experience, what are the main, let's say, challenges, issues, and mistakes that you see people do when starting to implement technical SEO on websites? In my case, I will start with what I just mentioned, right? A lot of SEOs wasting so much time, or, you know, like saying, oh, technical SEO, and they are literally working with a website of 5 pages. I mean, unless you are blocking your 5 pages with the robots.txt or no indexing them with the meta robots, I mean, technical SEO will be a non-issue here, right? But it becomes more important. And I actually coincidentally have a great, interesting, let's say here, graph that I shared. I don't know if you saw yesterday, the SEO area of importance versus the website size. So you can see how technical becomes more important when the website size becomes also much bigger, right? Then indeed, like content tends to decrease a little bit, not necessarily a lot. And then backlinks, the bigger the website is, usually the more authoritative is, the bigger the brand is, the less of an issue backlinks are, because usually websites are naturally attracting backlinks because they have tons of content, they have a lot of pages, bigger brands, or established and authoritative properties, etc. But yes, technical is here when it becomes an issue, right? So one of the main challenges that I see is SEOs wasting so much time on technical and trying to have the perfectly optimized technical website when it won't add up. It won't help much to achieve much else. There's only so much that you can do, right? When you are at that stage of 10 pages, 100 pages, something
Definitely,
like that.
I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things with technical SEO is prioritization. And exactly what you were saying there, little, it's easy to get caught up in loads of issues, and most tools that you put a website into, they'll flag up all these different issues, and you could spend forever sort of going through individual ones that might not make any difference. So one of the biggest things that I always try to push people to do, and this is very dependent on the size of site you're looking at, but to look at things, group issues, and find the source of the problem. So think in template, like page template. Don't try to solve an issue for 1,000, 10,000 pages. If that's all for the same template, that might be one issue. So don't get overwhelmed by these tools saying you've got an issue that affects 20,000 pages. It might be an issue that you need to solve in one place.
Yeah, an example, right? Oh, you have a canonicalization problem affecting 20,000 product pages, but literally this problem will be fixed by changing the configuration of a single template that will affect 20,000 pages, right? So what it is important here is true, and I believe that this is a great advice here, identify the scope of the problem and the source of the problem, right? The source to fix the problem, how difficult it is. It's changing the tag on a single template of the CMS of the website that will end up affecting hundreds of millions or thousands of pages. And what is the role and importance of these pages? Because again, imagine if an example, the privacy policy page is no index. I mean, it would be great that when someone searches privacy policy plus brand, it is findable. But how critical is this for the mission, the goal, the business goal, and the marketing goal, and the SEO goal of the website? Very small, right? And the same configuration, but on a very important, the homepage or the main category page can have a much bigger role. So it's important here that what Geoff mentioned before regarding the tools, don't take whatever ratings or metrics of, oh, you have your website 80% out of 100 optimized. That is just a reference. Take that as a reference. Go through the misconfigurations or configurations that you know that matter to you, and check if the pages that actually matter to your website based on your goals are actually affected or not. Don't take the word of ratings of any tools, SEO audit tools even, in this 100% by the face, right? They don't work like that. Otherwise, technical SEO wouldn't be necessary, right? Everybody will run automatically on these tools and will get that. No, it doesn't work. These issues need to be put into your own context. Which are the pages that are being affected, and how big of this issue is actually for you based on your goal, right? That is fundamental.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned tools there earlier. That was one of the things when I was working at Sitebulb, as a team, even when we were promoting the tool, we said, don't blindly listen to us, because we don't know your business priorities. We don't know which are your most important products or parts of your website. So it's really important to remember that a tool is just a tool. You need to interpret it.
Yeah, by that, I think it's a good opportunity to answer one of the questions here. Is it good to use several tools at the same time to see the technical state of a site and compare? Or is it better to be, yes? I mean, again, use common sense here. You cannot spend 6 months crawling the website with 100 tools that are out there. There's only so much that they will adopt, right? But I tend to use at least a couple to crawl the website, and then with the data of the Google Search Console, with the sample data of Google Search Console, indexing report, crawl report, and then double validating and checking the different type of pages with the URL inspect tool, I validate if the results are consistent. If I see that the results from Screaming Frog, from Sitebulb, from the Google Search Console data, from SEMrush crawler data, and all of the top 3 tools that I have access are consistent, Great. At the end of the day, you must remember, and there's something interesting too. I have gotten these questions on new SEO. So, oh my God, this tool is flagging this as an error, but I double check manually, and I double check with the Google Search Console, and I double check, and that is not an error there. What do I do? Is like, okay, if you have checked yourself manually that there's no issue, if you have checked with the Google bot directly with in the Google Search Console that there's no issue, you don't see a decrease or like whatever, that's probably a bug of the tool, right? I mean, there's only like some people are like, unfortunately, very worried about what X or Y tool says. They are just mediums for you to obtain the information, but many times the information, because of X or Y, might not necessarily be accurate. So look for consistency. When you crawl, use the Google bot, mobile Google bot, which is the one used by Google to crawl, their user agent that they use to crawl, to try to simulate as much as possible. What you need to understand is that what these tools try is to simulate the behavior that the real Google bot have, but they might not necessarily be 100% accurate, right? So take them with a grain of salt, validate yourself randomly, manually, to see if you see the issues or not, and double check as much as possible with the Google Search Console data. And the URL inspect tool is very, very handy for this.
Yeah, and I think once you find if you're getting the odd consistencies, you're then able to have a different view on the rest of the crawl data that you might have, because if it's showing different things when you look manually versus a crawl that you've got, you might find out that that tool is getting blocked in some ways. So that list of 404 errors you're going to give to the developers to sort, actually, they might not be 404s. It might just be the tool was getting blocked. So it's worth being careful and always be cautious that the tool might be saying something very different to yourself and Google as well.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
So just to give an idea of the stack that I use in terms of the tools, going back to that original question, personally, I'm biased. I use Sitebulb. I double check things with Screaming Frog, and Google Search Console is always in there, but then also manually checking with just your browser.
Perfect. So here is another question, right? How recommendable is it to use automatic site status reports to see the health of a page? So again, tools, what they tend to do is to automate validation, right? Like we have tools like Content King, or also SEO crawlers like Sitebulb, Screaming Frog, any SEO crawlers. You can configure to automate validations, to automate crawls. You can automate the crawls and leave it scheduled once per week, once per day, if you want. With Content King, it runs on real time. So whenever a page changes its status, you will be alerted right away if you have configured that alert, right? The key here is to, again, be reasonable. If you know that the website is not launching any updates every day, but they do it every week, I mean, it might be too much to be running daily crawls, right? Because 99.9% of the chances is that nothing is wrong there, won't change if they are not releasing daily changes, right? It's like when clients ask you for daily reports, and it's like, what do you want me to inform you that changes daily? If you release changes every 2 weeks, it's like not reasonable, right? So common sense here. How often does the site launch stuff? It launches stuff once every 2 weeks. So once every 2 weeks, before and after the launch, you will crawl. You will crawl before to see if all is okay. You will crawl after. You will crawl on the stage environment. Whenever you work to change technical configurations of websites, try to coordinate with developers so they enable a dev environment or a stage environment. It's usually called to. On a subdomain, it's important that this environment is not accessible to crawlers, blocked by the robots.txt, also blocked requiring authentication. You can configure this authentication or ask the developer to configure this authentication through htaccess or other methods. But the point here is that the Googlebot cannot access this environment that should replicate what you have live on the website. What is this environment for? well, this environment should exist not only for SEO, but for the product itself. Whatever new feature, whatever new content is meant to be launched, it should be tested there to see if it works as intended. And if not, it's not going to be moved live. It's not going to be launched. But if it does, you will approve that at least the SEO bit of things are okay, and it launches. And then once it launches, you will validate again. So what is critical here is that you establish a working workflow. So whatever action plan and recommendation you have is released every week, every 2 weeks, every whatever resources are in the organization to implement. And there is good communication, so you can always validate first that all is configured well before it is launched, and then you can configure after it is launched with crawlers, right? You can also configure any SEO crawler to overwrite the robots.txt, so you can access the test environment, or add the authentication information in the SEO crawlers too, so you can access this environment and you can test the environment too. So yes, coordinating well there is important. You can set automated let's say crawls, but again, if you I mean, your involvement, communication, prioritization here is critical. You cannot just configure an SEO crawl, automated crawl, and configure it to be sent to the developer or automatically without any context. Nothing will be done. Issues that are stuff that are not issues will be thought to be issues because developers won't know the context. An example, a lot of SEO crawlers will say, oh, you have pages that are no index. Big warning, error. No, maybe these are pages that are on purpose no indexed by you. And these are not issues because of your goals, your context, your understanding, right? So be very, very careful when sending automated reports of whatever nature, technical content, whatever nature. This should be sent to you first so you can validate, you can monitor, and then based on what you find, then you will, let's say, properly communicate what you actually need with very specific actions to take based on your goals, right? I think this is particularly important. And then whenever something you request anything to the developers, if you don't have access to change things yourself, it is important that you explain to the developer the scope, or you need to change the meta robots configuration in this type of websites in this section, and that's it, in this type of pages, right? Be very specific with the scope, because otherwise it's very easy for them to make mistake. Send examples, send a screenshot, say this here, and with a big screenshot, mark it with Figma, right? Here is wrong, and here is an example how it should look, with a screenshot of how your competitor or any other website is doing well, to avoid issues, to avoid misunderstandings as much as possible, right? You don't want to do their work. They are the developers. They know how to do it, but it's good that you give a reference and you give very specific and accurate specifications so there are no mistakes. Because believe me, if you leave this on their own, it will likely never happen, or it will happen after a lot of back and forth, and you don't want to waste time. The key here is to make it cost effective, remember? A very cost effective, very high impact. So focus on improving and optimizing those technical configurations that actually matter for your particular SEO process and context on website, rather than trying to leave everything perfectly optimized. That is not helpful. That is just a waste of resources. And then on the other hand, specifying clearly to developers why you need something, because they might find different ways to implement it. So they need to understand the why, and which is the scope, and a few examples. So they understand exactly what it is, and you clarify much more easily and specify much more easily what you need. Anything else here, Geoff, that you think also particularly useful to clarify?
I think just going back to the original thing, the reports see health of the page. Personally, I prefer automated reports on changes to pages. So forgetting about the health reports, just has there been things implemented on the website? So if there's a load of new canonicals appeared on the site, I know that's something I need to go and look at. So it's not necessarily looking at whether there's issues or not. It's just, have there been changes made, so that I can go and look at, and that sort of thing flags up to me. And Content King, that's the sort of thing that I use that for occasionally.
Amazing. Yes, there is another point here. I think that connects a lot with what we're talking about. Understanding HTML, which is the building block of how a website is built here, is particularly useful. That doesn't mean that you need to code, that you need to learn to create a website from scratch, or you need to know Python, because there's a lot of things that are conflated here, right? Very usually. And I have had this question every time that I have done a mentorship in the past to new SEOs. Oh, Aleida, should I need to learn JavaScript, or to build a website from scratch, or to be a developer, to learn Python? It's like, no, wait. First, what it is helpful is that if you're going to be an overall well-rounded SEO specialist, especially if you want to become and you want to specialize as a technical SEO, learning how Google works and how Google understands and reads your website is fundamental. And the reality is that Google will understand certain configurations that is in the HTML, certain codes. So understanding the base of HTML is important. That doesn't mean that you will need to learn how to code from scratch or build a website by yourself. One thing is understanding the code, what tag does what, and the order and the general rules. And another thing is that you start coding by yourself, right? So different things, right? But I think it's particularly important to understand how HTML works. Then HTML, CSS, that also have to do with responsive web design and have a role there on image loading, etc. Is it's particularly important. Angel, can you please mute your microphone while we speak? Thank you very much. I think there's sound coming from you. So that is particularly important. There are other languages out there, programming languages, that might be useful for other purposes, but for the fundamentals here, not necessarily. I mean, you can learn to code or to web development in Python, Ruby, whatever other programming language, for the sake of automating stuff, automating tasks. Build your own crawler if you want. Build a content analyzer rather than buying one. A lot of people love to reinvent the wheel. I more than to use, if there's already something provided in the market, I prefer to pay money and save myself that time to reinvent the wheel. But there are definitely areas and circumstances in which you want to be a leader and want to invest on building your own tools to do something particularly useful, to automate that task in a faster way, to facilitate your life on the analysis, right? For that, you can hire a developer, or if you really love coding and have skills, you can learn how to do it too. But I have to say, that doesn't have to do with SEO per se, right? That is becoming a developer, which is amazing and great, and that can be definitely an additional path and can give you additional abilities for certain roles that require knowledge of data analysis and automation. So that can be something extra for you to differentiate versus other SEOs, and to be hired by certain more, let's say, sophisticated organizations that look for this type of profiles. But my point here, especially if you're starting with SEO, HTML is what you need to learn, not necessarily to develop yourself from scratch, but yes, at least to understand, right? Start with the base, to understand the codes, because this is what you will be validating, analyzing. So you need to understand what a meta route is for, where it should be located, what does it do, does it work the same way if it is located here or there, etc., etc. And for that, I will highly advise that you play with it, that you create your own website, that you open even a free website that, besides having a visual editor, will have also the code version of the editor, so you can play around the tags that are already there, right? You don't need to code from scratch again. And this should be something fun, something that you will should like to do. And there are a lot of guides and references in Learning SEO for this. So I like to clarify this because, as you can see, like, coding is conflated a lot, but it's critical to differentiate and to focus on when and which is actually meaningful for you when you become technical SEO, right? So another question here: what are the most critical technical elements to consider as a part of a tech SEO audit? Geoff, how do you prioritize this, and how do you tackle this usually?
I mean, it goes back to what you were saying right at the start, Leda. I mean, it's first, Google needs to be able to access your URLs. So if it's throwing up server errors, or you don't have any URLs, I mean, some of the new sort of progressive web apps and things, you find there are no URLs there for Google to see. So first thing is just making sure Google can actually see your URLs. Then they need to be able to index them. So make sure no indexed. There's nothing nasty there, just blocking Google from being able to index them. And then I would say probably the next stage is that Google can see your content. So they may be able to crawl your URLs, but if, I mean, it's a bad example because it's a bit more complicated, but is it all wrapped in JavaScript? Or is it all hidden in some way from Google that they cannot see it? And then you're moving on to more issues like findability. So can Google actually find a particular page, or have you got loads of orphaned ones? Have you got your internal linking set up and things like that? And the likes of duplicate URLs and stuff. So you're starting from the bare essentials of, can Google see this stuff at all, to then gradually moving through to, could they index them? And then how would they find them? And then at the other end of the scale, you've got things like structured data and things like that, which are optimizing the content that they can find. And they're more sort of the nice to haves when it comes to technical SEO. And there's a lot in between, but your core bit is making sure that Google can see it, index it, and find its way to it.
I like that differentiation of fundamental, what can actually harm you, like the things that can have actually like negatively affect you as a base, to avoid them. So blocking the whole website or important areas of the website, the robust TXT, or no indexing pages by mistake. I see a lot of e-commerce or marketplaces that block and no index. Also facets after this point, right? Without realizing that applying rules by heart like this, like not validating the supply and demand and potential of these pages many times in bulk, will end up hurting also the possibility to grow with many of these pages that have actually good, relevant, unique, comprehensive information, and they provide for really good demand that is relevant for the website, right? So it can end up being even harmful. Then on the other hand, JavaScript and certain tags in the head of the HTML, you will see that there are a lot of, if you follow, and please follow, not necessarily only through SEO FOMO, but any other newsletter, or even directly by browsing Search Engine Roundtable from time to time. Barry Schwartz does an amazing work documenting a lot of the questions and doubts that SEO ask Google. And many of these are edge cases and issues, little issues that easily get overlooked, but can happen most than you think of in bigger websites. So for example, adding code that will break the head of the HTML. And just because you have a lot of, for example, little JavaScript that breaks in the head of the HTML before you specified your canonical tag or your hreflang annotations, Google cannot continue rendering well the page and will stop, and they won't take your canonical tag into account. They won't take your hreflang into account. So you crawl with your SEO crawler. The SEO crawler says that all is okay. Not all will take into consideration if the JavaScript breaks or not. Some do, some not, some they don't, because again, they try to replicate, they try to simulate, but they are not Google at the end of the day. And then Google does. And then you realize this by validating yourself through the Google Search Console URL inspect tool, for example. Or when that is why you should always try to at least a couple of pages from every type. Whenever you release something, validate yourself and see what actually Google renders and the render HTML in the snapshot that they show to validate what Google says. And then many times too, you won't even be notified at all and you see the pages decreasing. And this is when the fun part of being a technical SEO becomes, because you need to troubleshoot. You need to understand what Geoff said before. What happened this week? What was launched? What was changed? What was the before and after of the code? And that is why I also highly recommend that whenever you crawl, you save a copy of what you crawl. And any SEO crawler also usually provides this feature to save a copy of whatever you crawl, so you can compare the before and after in case the developer doesn't give you easily access, right, to do it. So this is another thing that I will highly advise you to do, right? Starting from the harmful things that can harm and validate like this, and then the nice to have. Structured data is nice to have. Very unlikely the lack of structured data will make, or the misconfiguration of structured data will make your website decrease, right, in rankings. But not achieving or growing in click-through rate, that can be an effect, right? So again, what can actually, if it is misconfigured to make your website go down and drop, or vice versa, right? So I will start by validating that stuff that can be really harmful, or if misconfigured on the website. Then again, internal links. That is one of the things, and I see here one of the questions aligned to the questions, what are some of the most common overlooked technical issues that can negatively affect the inclusion of tags or JavaScript that breaks the head of the HTML, and then Google overlooks everything else from the configuration. That is one. Then also the lack of internal links to core, very important pages to rank through the customer journey. Maybe this page is not one of the top 10 categories, but it's a subcategory that is very popular. And just because it is not a top category, it's not included in the homepage or in the main navigation. It should, if it's going to bring meaningful traffic and conversions, right? So again, analyzing, and any SEO crawler has a report and configuration to understand internal linking. Check if the main to rank pages, or the pages that should bring a lot of traffic, are consistently well internally linked as they should because of their importance, right? A page that is meant to be ranked in 100,000 pages, it can only have 5 links or 10 links or 50 links, while the top categories all have 10,000, right? No, you need to help these pages to be found and to pass more value to them, right? Anything else that you would like to highlight, Geoff, as most common issues here to look for opportunities?
Internal linking, just what you were saying there, and so many times I'm coming across there's 2 different types of internal linking. There's sort of your body links and that, which are kind of going into more of a content area, but structured linking is something that's really overlooked, like your breadcrumbs and sort of related products and things like that. And then one of the biggest issues I've been coming across recently is, we've mentioned about canonical URLs and things, and finding all of the internal links are pointing to non-canonical pages. So you've got no links to what you would consider the real page, the one you want Google to index. So internal linking is a much bigger thing than a lot of people give it credit for, and it can have a lot more power as well. And kind of tied in with that as well, duplicate URLs. It's they all sort of merge into each other.
One of these scenarios that you mentioned of linking to internal pages to pages that are canonicalized to others, and therefore not passing direct popularity to the ones that are meant to rank, happen because of adding parameters in the URLs that we're into because of tracking purposes. There are proper ways to do this. And we will see it eventually in the analytics sections, right? In the SEO and analytics section. But this is actually beyond the scope of actual SEOs, right? Like, just coordinate well with your analytics person so they can configure events and all the configurations through proper configurations through the Google Analytics or whatever other analytics platform they have access to, but you shouldn't be adding parameters to internal links, because otherwise all of the internal links will go to pages that have, that are not the meant to be ranked pages in the first place, but canonicalized URLs. That is a very common, unfortunately, still today, scenario, right? There is these questions that I found to be interesting regarding if we carry out an audit and we identify a tech SEO issue where we can explain what the issue is and how it impacts the website, but we don't necessarily know how to set up the technical aspect of it. This is the thing. You don't need to know how to configure it yourself. It's not your work. You're not the developer here. Every URL that is shown in HTTP should be 301 redirected to the HTTPS version. That should be the recommendation. Right now, at the moment, this is not happening. You show a screenshot that this is not happening, that you're duplicating. You show how other websites are doing it. We know that that can be done through the HT access if this is an Apache server, etc., etc. But you don't need to know how to do it. That is a DevOps web server administrator work to do, and they should know how to do it. So you as an SEO, you shouldn't enter into this phase. In fact, I will say that if I was a developer, I wouldn't like an SEO to tell me how to do my work. That is what I know, right? Like, it's like when you tell a copywriter, you need to add the FAQs, an FAQ section here in this page, in this solution page, to implement structured data, because it will be relevant at this stage of the journey. It will help to improve the click-through rate. And these are the 5 questions that you need to feature there. I never do that, ever. I say, look, I have gathered this data through the keyword tool, and these are the most common questions that the user are asking. Let's talk with the customer support team, because they have know-how about what are the most common questions from customers too. And with all of this input, please write and select the 5 top questions that you, as the know-how person of this project, know that will be more relevant to feature in the product at this stage of the journey. And then you assess that it's really relevant from a semantic standpoint, etc. But you shouldn't have a say there. Like, I am very respectful. And actually, I had a conversation with a copywriter of a project where I'm working, and she laughed when I say, I am not messing with what section you add regarding this article or not. That is your job as a copywriter. I am going to ensure to try to give you input and alignment to ensure that we facilitate Google's work to understand what the content is about, so they can rank the content consistently for these queries. The same with technical SEO. I know that, and we should know how a title tag and a description and a canonical tag is included, but an example maybe, and this is the thing with CMSs, we know how the HTML should look, right? The output, how a canonical tag should look, but maybe to change the canonical tag through a very particular or specific CMS, the developer will need to configure a lot of stuff in the back, right? So we should never assume that something is super easy or difficult, or that we know better how to do it, because they should know. And that is why, and you implement the canonical tag that you can do it like this, like this, like, no. Canonical tags that should look like this. You show the desired output that you want, and that's it. How they come up with the output is up to them. They know how the systems will work. So the output can be like that. Then they can come back and say, look, with the current CMS, I have restrictions on changing the head of the HTML pages in the next 3 months, because we're doing this overhaul, we're doing this migration. And you say, okay, well, that is a little bit the life of the technical SEO. So how we can find a workaround? Can we implement this in a different way? Can we wait for a bit, and how this will impact the goal, right? Like, you start aligning and you start strategizing, identify if there are other ways to implement this. You can also implement canonical tags through the HTTP headers too. Maybe that's a workaround, right? So you start identifying how the configurations work and what are the resources available to you to make them work how you like. And if there are other workarounds or other configurations that you can use instead, if there's a blocker with something, right? So that is what we are here. We have this level of understanding, strategizing, and that is why a tool cannot replace our work, right? Because this is the value that we bring, right? But yes, no worries, because you don't need to explain how everything should be implemented, right? Developers should know that bit of work. What we should make it clear is why we want it in this way, and the type of outcome that we want, so they are accurate in the way that they implement it, right? Here, to talk more regarding CMSs, if you want to create a website for running technical SEO experiments in the particular CMS that you will allow us to do it without the need of developers, I believe that WordPress is particularly useful for that, because you can easily access a visual editor and then also the code editor quite easily, and it's free, and you can get a lot of hostings for very, very cheap to work with it, etc. There are many others out there. Wix is particularly useful also with that. But I mean, if you have minimum resources, etc., I will say go ahead and start with WordPress, right? I don't know if you have any other advice from that side, Geoff, regarding testing.
WordPress only is my go-to as well. That's what I've done most of my experiments on. But I would also say that if you're always working with a particular CMS, if your main business is on one, if your clients are on one, then there's nothing against doing one on that. Most platforms, you should be able to set something up yourself. Like there are ways of getting around without a developer, unless it's a particularly complex one, but there's usually something template that you can use. There may be cost issues come about there, but give it a go. It's worthwhile going through that process. The same way we talked about learning HTML, it's worthwhile finding out, well, what processor do you need to go to get set up? And if you can experiment on the same CMS as your main website's on, even better, because you get to know the nuances of that.
Yeah, 100%. There are a couple of questions too that I would like to talk before wrapping up today, because I believe is they're like very focused on CMSs or platforms. Like there is one saying, are templated websites bad for technical optimization? So for example, built on this platform or the other platform, or what do you do? What do you recommend prioritizing technical SEO when using an e-commerce platform like Oracle or Adobe, whatever? Like, it doesn't matter. The platform doesn't matter. I mean, the platform should be a tool for you to implement something supposedly easily, right? But that is a decision that is out of your scope. You're not the owner of the website usually, but that was a business decision, or that the business owner made with the developer or with the CTO or whatever technical focused person that they have within the organization. So unfortunately, it's not within your scope. If you're starting with a startup, it's great that you can recommend, okay, please choose with some requirements, choose a platform that can easily integrate SEO best practices, that is fast, that integrates structured data by default, things like that, right? But I mean, it's very unusual, I'm afraid, to be, especially like at the start at that point. But your best practices shouldn't, or best practices and then priorities or configurations to do shouldn't rely on the platform. You know what you need to do, not because of the platform that you're using. You know what you need to do because your goals. You know that you have that category that is being no index of your e-commerce. And you know that you need to index it. It doesn't matter if it is in WordPress, if it is in Wix, if it is in Adobe, whatever, if it is in Shopify. I don't care about the CMS, because what I know is that that category needs to be indexed. How it should look like this. Can you request, or you should request the developer to make it happen? Yes. How this person will do it with the CMSs, that's his or her problem. Thankfully, that is why we are not developers, but they are, right? Like, but I mean, if they have constraints because of the platform, the problem here is when they are constrained. So they will come back and they will tell you, look, sorry, but with this platform, we cannot change the meta robots of categories. So here is when the actual value of you as a technical SEO comes. Okay, what are the alternatives? What can you touch? You cannot touch the meta robots. Can you touch the HTTP headers? Can you at least canonicalize? Can we block? Identify workarounds, because you know what the outcome is. you know? Or can we enable an alternate page that will be able to run for these queries instead? Be creative, strategize. That is the value of us as SEOs, right? We work with constraints. And then if you see that the constraints are too much and nothing can be done, maybe we should choose better clients. and unfortunately, that's it, right? I have had those challenges too. That is why I believe that literally like 50% of chances of SEO success is evident right from the start when we validate the SEO process with the clients that we sell for. If there are a lot of restrictions at the beginning and you see a lot of negativity, I identify that right from the beginning, and I see, oh my God, they don't have resources, they don't have technical SEO, to implement technical SEO, they don't have a developer, and they don't have resources to hire a developer or an agency, and they don't know how to touch the code of the CMS. Maybe SEO is not a fit for them. Maybe. You see what I mean, right? So half of the challenges, many times, unfortunately, come at this point. I understand that, unfortunately, for many of us, we don't have a say at that point, right? It's true, but that should change a lot in the culture of how SEO is sold as a project, and how to choose projects and position SEO as a solution, right? To be a real solution rather than not being a solution and just consumer resources, right? And being a waste of time for the organization. However, having said that, it's important to understand that what we recommend and what we should try to achieve shouldn't be necessarily by default restricted or because of the platform, right? Like that should be like the next step. The developer should be the person in charge to come to us and say, that is not doable or that is difficult. And then we should help and try to work together to come up with a solution, with an alternative, right?
I would also add to that as well. I mean, if you're working with a particular CMS, get familiar with it. That I know there is the argument you just said there later that we have got to live with it. We've got to focus on the end result. But like, so using Shopify as an example, there's out of the box, it has specific issues for SEO. There's a couple of duplicate URL things that it's the same on most Shopify websites. And there's guides out there of how to sort that. So rather than having to do a lot of that background work yourself, you can get up to speed with, well, I know these are really common Shopify issues, and here's a solution. You put that to the developer, like maybe this is something you want to look at.
I love that you said this, Geoff, because actually another question that I wanted to finish with our today's session is like, what happens when the developer comes and say, this cannot be done, and they don't give any explanation? Well, you should ask for an explanation. You should position yourself to be able to ask for an explanation. Why? Can you explain why? Maybe it's important for me to understand why, to find an alternative, because this needs to be done, not for me, but for the business. So we need to find an alternative. So they can see because of this and this and this. So can you explain me why it cannot be done? So we can find a workaround. And then what you mentioned before, Geoff, is critical. If we know that half of our clients work with WordPress, or half of our clients are e-commerce with Shopify or Wix or this, maybe we should start installing these platforms on our website, on our test website, and play around ourselves to better understand the actual constraint and how it works. And proactivity here is critical. Search for yourself. If they say that it cannot be done, research for you to see if it's actually the question. Ask in Stack Overflow, in developer communities. Look for yourself, test for yourself to identify if that's the case of the workarounds. And is unfortunately, there are, like, I'm not saying that this is the default, right? But in all professions, there are people who they don't like to look much into things and just give you the default answer that I think will be easier for them. And that's it. But so you need to take the extra mile, and because it's important for you to look for alternatives and look for potential answers, right? But always you need to position yourself to be at the stage of saying, like, can you please explain why? Because it's important to me to understand to achieve this. If this is really not possible in another way, then because is critical for the goal. And I'm not going to be asking you for something that is not really critical for the goal. And that is why we should also learn how to prioritize well, and so they know that you are not the type of person asking, but you're asking because it's actually meaningful. And that should be the base set for our technical SEO work and whatever work in SEO, right? So Thank you very much. I think that we have tackled most of all of the questions are at an overall level. There are a few questions regarding structured data and other things that we will have proper cross-budget sessions. We will have proper, or e-commerce proper sessions for that in any case, and expect that we tackle more specific issues there. But very, very handy. Thank you very much, Geoff, for your insights too. Really appreciate it. And if any of you also have any more questions, etc. Geoff is also very active in social media. You can definitely follow Geoff up there too. And we're happy to follow up with any questions that you might have later on too. And yes, there's a comment here. It's like, it's a bit trickier when you work in-house. Yes, because you have all of the eggs in a single bag. And that is why when you work in-house, you really need to validate and assess well when you enter and work in a new place, because all of your eggs will be in a single bag. 100%. Yeah, indeed. It is like that, indeed. So yes, well, thank you very much, everybody, and have a lovely day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.